Jonathan with Iron Mind Hypnosis. I want to talk about two human biases, two neurological biases that we all have that I feel are probably not totally, but certainly partially responsible for a lot of the danger, loss, and violence happening in the world. Two. The first one I want to talk about is the fundamental attribution error. This is where, as entities, we are locked in our heads. We've got our skull. We can perceive the outside world through our eyes, our ears, taste buds, sense of touch, these sorts of things, right? We've got much more bandwidth for seeing visions in our head, hearing our own voice, knowing our intentions. We've got more bandwidth for that. That's closer to us because it's right there in the gray matter. But we can only see what other people put out on the outside while we're observing it, when we're paying attention. There's a bunch of limits on what we can see of other people. So we have the tendency to judge other people, to make evaluations. We're observing based on our observations. And we try to backfill from those observations what might be going on, build a theory of mind, as it's called, what people are thinking. Now, building a theory of mind is a great, wonderful power of the human mind, to build a theory of another person's mind, to make a guess what they're after. It's a great power that we have. It is far from perfect. It is tremendously far from perfect. Even people who consider themselves empathic or otherwise very skilled, they have to check in. They can't just read things coming off, whether it's auras, energies, micro expressions. Those aren't the full state. Those aren't the full breadth of what is going on inside. So we see whatever we see from other people, and we try to make a theory of mind for what's going on in them. In us, we have maybe not perfect, but certainly much more accurate, close access to the intentions. Why a thing is done. Why, what virtue, what values are being expressed, what you're trying to take care of, who you're trying to take care of, why it's important. We have much better access to why we're doing a thing than actually to what we're doing as people. You probably know that you've probably had people reread a letter you've written. You created it in your mind, you put it on the document, you probably reread it a couple of times yourself, and you decided you were quite happy with it. And then you asked somebody else's opinion, and their opinion probably had a few things to say. Likewise, maybe you asked somebody's opinion on an art, television show, maybe how you're dressed. You might have asked people's opinion on many things, because we can't see perfectly even what we create, even what we look like. Even with a mirror, the mirror shows one face, and usually only when we remember to look at it and smile. So we can see other people's behavior, but we can't see our own nearly as well. And we can only see other people's behavior when we're looking at it. And most people in our lives are not with us most of the time. So that's the fundamental attribution error, is we believe the importance of our own purposes, our own mental state, the values, the virtues that we wish to express, because we have access to those. And we believe that what we're trying to achieve, the good we're trying to do, must be seen by everybody. It should be obvious because it's obvious to us. And then we see other people's behavior. And we only see the behavior and specifically how it impacts us. And so we create a theory of mind for what sort of person would impact us in that way. That's great. That's one thing. I promised you two. And that's the negativity bias. They say this is a thing that probably is a survival instinct from times when being pessimistic, being on the lookout for danger was a tremendously useful thing. Because even a couple of hundred years ago, our world was a much more objectively dangerous place. There were a lot more ways to get killed and get killed early than the world most of us live in right now. Even in a world with violence running rampant, our world is much less violent than it was even when I was born. But our minds retain a hardwired bias to look out for negative information, because negative information, threats, could be tremendously important. They could be life or death. Good information, nice to have. Winning lottery ticket, great news. If a winning lottery ticket is across the street and you can spy it, you somehow have fantastic vision and you can see that it's the winning ticket and it's there for you, and all you have to do is cross a busy street. That busy street still has to be much more important. You have to negotiate the threats of that busy street. It will probably be worth you're going to the crosswalk, waiting for the signal to cross safely and take the chance of never getting that winning ticket or what other valuable thing you see. Because in certain situations, the danger actually is high. And we come from a history where the threats were very real, very mortal threats. Now, in our modern lives, as I said, the death rate from a lot of things is much reduced. The number of us that live longer is much increased. Yes, a lot of that is child mortality. But we also live in a world less violent than it was even a few decades ago. Even though the capabilities for violence have increased and our ability to receive news of violence has vastly increased. We live in a world where news outlets and social media can connect us with bad news from across the planet faster than a single breath, faster than you can catch your breath. So why is that important? The bias for this bad news, it seems like it protects us from many dangerous things. Yes, it does. It's useful. But most of the threats we face are not of the class that we will end. Even if it's a threat in your workplace, somebody, office politics, or your boss doesn't like the work, or whatever. Almost never is that class of threat going to end you. We live in a society where if you were employed once, you can probably get employed again. Yes, there's some other stuff going on right at the moment, and that's a threat, but we have employment security agencies in all the states to even if you lose a job, they make sure that you have money coming in to look after your needs while you're looking for another job. even in a world where another job would not be forthcoming, and that money isn't forthcoming, there are many charities, there are many organizations, many people live, at the mercy of people that care about them, their family, or maybe even religious organizations or community service organizations. There are many different, yes, imperfect, but many different safety nets that make even some of the more extreme risks that many of us face these days much less than they were. So the reason I mention this is that negativity bias allows us to focus emotional energy and attention on negative information that will never have a physical, practical impact on our life. Most news items are negative and from places that we can't impact. Places across the world. We don't even get a vote in things going on other places. And even for things that are closer to home, often there's only so much that we can do. But our mind still looks for the negative information. Now, how do these two things, the fundamental attribution error and the negativity bias, play? Knowing that your negativity bias will have a stronger emotional spike to negative information, it takes almost no time for your brain to encode negative information, but it takes quite a long time for your brain to encode positive information, lock it into memory, to memorize it. Negative information, this is where many traumas come from, is something bad was seen, just like that. It's there, it's locked in, it's solid, right? Takes good news, usually a lot longer to encode the good news. So with the ability to lock in bad information quickly, and the fundamental attribution error, believing that things that are behaviors we see as bad, behaviors that are not to our benefit, behaviors that disagree with us in some way, behaviors that may pose some social threat to us or be counter to how we have structured our life or our philosophies, that information gets encoded quickly. We never have full access to what good the person is trying to do, even if we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what positive intention. And we only see slices of what the person's trying to do. And that bias to see the negative, even if we're a happy-go-lucky sort of person who believes that the universe is positive, still, negative information is super quick. Positive information takes longer. So it's easy to see negative information. In fact, ambiguous is the word I'm looking for. Information that it could be one way or the other. If it could be bad right away, you're thinking there's a chance it's bad until proven otherwise. And if you're interrupted in that memory process of trying to figure out, and all of our attention spans are short these days, of that process trying to figure out what's going on, if you don't have a chance to figure out that it's a good thing, you'll stick with that chance that was the bad thing. That explanation will stick with you. Which these two things put together mean that when we see the behavior of other people, we are more likely to notice those things that don't work for us, maybe violate our values, do not work well with our virtues, things that we think don't comply with law or ethics or common sense or good in some way. We're more likely to notice those things. And the internal state, the aspirations, the virtues the other person is trying to express, even if they're doing it imperfectly. We're all doing our virtues imperfectly. We never get to see those. And because of the bias, when we notice bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, okay thing, bad thing, because those get encoded quickly, the things that we notice about all of our observations are negative and emotionally charged. They seem threatening in some way. Those are the things that we then try to create that mental model, that theory of mind for the other person. So it is very easy to believe that the other person is in some way not a good person. Now, if you look at politics, you see people who are engaged in politics. Often, they have their camp, and that's about half the country, and they believe that the other camp, another approximately half the country, are not great people, possibly even horrible people. This could be horrible in terms of intelligence, horrible in terms of virtues, horrible in terms of intentions, whatever it is. They're just not great people. If you ask Camp A, Camp B is terrible. Ask Camp B, again, half the country. What about Camp A? Camp A is, again, seen as a bunch of people doing things that Camp B thinks is not great. And their theory of mind for Camp A is that they're not great people. They're not very smart people, or they're not very virtuous people. They're just not the sort of people you really want to be. And there you go. You got two sets. Now, just in case you might get the idea that this is a real thing, not always do these two groups, that 50-50 split that is there in almost everything. And yes, many of these topics are correlated. Not always is that line perfect, even though most things that are worth debating, that are hot issues, are split pretty close down the middle. If they weren't, fewer people would talk about them. But most of those things that split down the middle, different groups of people will end up on different sides of that fence, different sides of that split. And likewise, when that topic's up, even if they were in group A on one side for one topic and group B for another, if they've actually drifted across that line for some reason, they still think the group, now they're in group A, now they think group B is full of people who aren't very smart, or just following bad edicts from on high, or have weak morals. You see it time and time again. And the same goes in so many places. You'll see divisions between labor and management in many companies. You'll see divisions between people working in a company and people frequenting a company, the customers. You'll see groups of all sorts, and even within large groups, you get smaller groups that get the same thing going on. So I say all of this, and I know I've said a lot, to say just remember that just because your mind is telling you that another person can only be doing a thing out of either stupidity or malintent, don't believe your own mind. Sometimes, for all the great things that your mind does, and it's gotten you this far in life, it's got to be doing some good stuff for you. For all those things, know that it has biases. We all have biases. There's a long list of biases that have been studied by scientists who study this stuff, spend their careers working on cataloging and verifying these biases. But know that just because you have a view of somebody doesn't mean that's the full story. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you have a chance to just realize that other people, for all the ways they're different, are other people. Just like for all the ways you're different, you're another person to them. You might find yourself working with, friends with some of these people unless you actively take steps to only allow the most homogeneous group around yourself. But realize that other people are also doing what they see as best and reasonable. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.